Well, in the Old Testament, God relates differently to his people than he does in the New Testament because, for one thing, the ancient Israelites are a nation that are taking shape. Again, this is the context in which the Messiah would come. And also, we see that there are severe punishments, again, in light of the kind of harshness of the ancient Near East, that these were certain maximum penalties were mentioned for to kind of sober up the people, to remind them of the direction in which they needed to go. It's not as though all the laws of the Old Testament or in the law of Moses are ideal, because we recognize, as Jesus said in Matthew 19:8, that Moses permitted certain laws or commanded certain laws because of the hardness of human hearts. So it wasn't because these were ideal circumstances, but because Moses knew that people would sin, that there were certain fallen structures that needed to be modulated and controlled, like the issue of servitude and how do you humanize the service or servitude in the ancient Near East. Well, the scriptures give guidelines for that. So again, we need to think more in terms of incremental building, that God meets his people where they are, and again, it's a level or two above where the rest of the ancient Near Eastern peoples are, but yet God is ultimately thinking of moving them in a redemptive direction, such that a lot of those ideals from Genesis 1 and 2 about equality and marriage being between a man and a woman and so forth, that those things are to be ideal. Those things are to be understood as the direction in which we need to go, rather than simply accepting as they are those fallen ancient Near Eastern structures. We also see that in the New Testament with the inter-ethnic people of God, the church, the new Israel, that there is that things are different when it comes to even church discipline. Instead of, say, the possibility of capital punishment, you have excommunication. You have now, instead of the Israelites needed to preserve their own identity as distinct from the Gentile nations, now you have the fulfillment of the promise of Abraham fulfilled in all of the coming in of the Gentiles as well as Jews in Christ, that these are part of the people of God, and now things are of a different order, that things that had been operating in the Old Testament, food laws, sacrifices, civil punishments and so forth, that these things are now set aside for a new order in Christ, a new kingdom order that is beginning to experience the touches of the new creation brought about by Jesus' resurrection from the dead, signaling that there is a new creation that is now building and working toward the finalization of that when Jesus returns and heaven comes to earth, and there is a new heavens and a new earth with our resurrection bodies and so forth. So you see this sort of a progressive movement. And so rather than accepting what is going on in those early chapters of the scriptures, we start to see that there is this movement forward, preparing for something that is to be the fulfillment of what was only a shadow in the Old Testament.